I'm Matt with etrailer. Today we're going to be talking about the TruXedo Pro X15 Tonneau cover on our 2024 Nissan Titan. Now this is going to be a great fit for the Titan because this can work with your utility tracks or without them, and on top of that I think this gives us a nice finish to the back of our truck since we already have this more matte type of rails back here. But let's take a closer look at it. So with this tonneau cover, you're going to get all the same benefits that you would with most tonneau covers. One of those being that if someone's walking by, they won't be able to see into your bed and see the goods that you got. And it's going to keep out most moisture from getting in your bed. I will say no tonneau cover is completely 100% waterproof. And this is going to be the same way because with any type of bed, there's going to be so many creases in here that water will be able to get in to some degree, but this is going to keep a majority of it out. And on top of that, it does give you security because you can't open this up if your tailgate's up. So we do have a locking tailgate. If I lower that down, now I can gain access to it. And the way it works to roll it up is by pulling on this lever right here. That's going to unlatch it. Now, someone could get into here if they really wanted to. They could just grab a knife, cut right into it. But if you're looking for more security, another option I'd recommend you checking out would be a hard tonneau cover, one of which would be backflip. I like theirs because they have options that fold up against your bed. Now with this, you get a couple plus sides to it. So one of those plus sides is once it's rolled all the way back here, it's not going to block our back window and it's still going to give us full bed access back here. It might just take a couple inches from the very back of it, but since we have a 5.5 foot bed, we already don't have that much space. So we want to make sure we save as much as possible, and that's what I really like about this. Now I said this is only going to take up a couple inches on the back of here, but let me actually give you some hard measurements. So how far this is going to stick out from your bulkhead, that's only going to be about 2.5 inches. It's actually going to be the same for either one of your bed rails over here. This one's just slightly over 2.5 inches. And for the total height it adds to your bed, that's going to be a little bit under 1 inch. So those measurements just kind of let us know how much space this is really just taking in for the width and the length of your bed. And for the height, that's just good to know if it's going to get in your way when you're driving around. When you're driving around, 1 inch on your bed is something you're probably really not even going to notice. Now, something that is important to know though is how much space do we have for stacking things in your bed still. So if I come over here, go from the bottom of this rail here, you're going to have about 21 inches. So anything under 21 inches is going to fit in here just fine. And the way this is going to install is really nice because you won't have to make any modifications to your bed. What we're going to have is this clamp here. There's going to be an inner and an outer one that clamp together that squeeze the tonneau cover rail and your bed rail together. Now in our case today, we do have the utility tracks. I actually think it makes it a little bit easier to install if you don't, but either way, it's still a pretty simple process. Now, for when it comes to keeping water out of here, this does a really good job because we're going to have a seal on the very back of this. I'll get this out of our way so we can get a better look at it. The seal on your bulkhead side is going to prevent any water from seeping through here, and there's going to be two seals that work together. And then when it comes to the actual rails themselves, these rails are going to have a seal that sits underneath them. And you'll notice when I'm unrolling this, two things. One, we have the hook and loops. The hook and loops are going to keep water from seeping through between where the rail and the actual tonneau cover sits. And we're going to have this bar. This bar is going to go across in a couple different spots. And what that does is keeps tension on the cover, and it's going to prevent any water from really piling up on your tonneau cover. Because if it's piling up for a while, especially with snow, what can eventually happen is this can start to sag down. So that is something to keep in mind when you have a lot of snow. Just make sure you brush that off of here so it doesn't stretch out. And then once we get to the very end of it, we're going to have this bar that reaches across that goes into these two hooks. And this is what gives us plenty of tension here. You pull that down, it's nice and tight. You notice we have an additional seal here. So when we close our tailgate, that's going to prevent any water from getting in there either. But other than that, there's not too much to it. One thing I do appreciate, like I was talking about earlier, this is more of a matte finish, so it feels a little more like fabric. And I think that's just a little bit more pleasing on the eyes, especially since we have more of a matte surface back here. But other than that, I think it's really good. If you're looking for another option, Truxedo has something else, and that's if you have a lot of stuff nearest to your bulkhead. You can actually pull a trigger back here and fold this section back so you can reach those goods here. And that's going to make things a lot more convenient than having to roll this all the way up or most of the way up. The one downside to it is you're not going to have the same security like you would with this. Because with that one, there is going to be a little lever and there's going to be no way to really lock that up. Compared to this where you have to have your vehicle unlocked so we can open up the tailgate. Now when it comes to installing it, it's actually a pretty simple process. Just a few clamps that go into place. The biggest thing is just making sure you throw in that additional padding to make sure water doesn't seep through here. And if you do decide to go with this after watching the video today, let us know how it's working for you in a review. But without further ado, let's jump into the install. All right, so the first thing I recommend doing is just starting with the bulkhead, because you're going to have this foam strip that comes with it. It's just going to be rolled up when you get it initially. You'll notice it has this kind of flared edge, and that's going to be the side that faces towards your tailgate. Once we have this in hand, we're going to come over to the bulkhead and we're going to clean this off with some soapy water. Once that's done, hit it with some alcohol, make sure that surface is clean. If you have some type of bed liner in here or a spray-in liner, sometimes it might be a little bit hard to adhere because it's going to be so porous, it doesn't want to grab on. But right now I do have this metal on contact, what we're going to have here, so I won't have any issues. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stuff that underneath this rail cap, and we're going to remove that adhesive protector. Just going to be a paper strip on the bottom. Pull that right off. And I'm going to try to shove it underneath there a bit, because we want to prevent any water from seeping through here as much as possible. And then I'm just going to go down here. I do recommend having that flared edge kind of lined up with the edge of that bulkhead. Now before we get our tonneau cover rails on our bed, we got a couple more foam pieces, and we're going to have this kind of square looking one. And what we're going to do here is remove that paper backing, revealing the adhesive. There it is. And we're going to put it against a bulkhead at this far corner right here. There's going to be one on each corner. And when you do this, you want this to be roughly 1/8 of an inch above your bed rails. You're just going to push it into place then. I might hold it there for a few seconds. And there we have it. A little smushed right now. But what we're going to do next is grab our tonneau cover rails. And what I'll do a lot of times is I'll just put these in their spot. So this is going to be one that's going to sit on your passenger side. And when I flip this around, this here is going to be the cab side of it. You're going to notice there's a little indentation here, and there's going to be a foam piece that goes into here. And it should contour to that opening there. Now for the passenger side, you're typically going to use the G foam pad, and for the driver's side, you're going to typically use the H1 for the cab side of this rail. A good way to also check is just to put the foam pad in there and see if it does match that contour. You're on the right track. So now I'm going to remove that paper backing to it and put it on there. And then we can actually get to putting these rails on our bed rails. So when we put our rails on here, it's also going to depend on if you have the utility tracks or not. We do today. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Typically, if you don't though, you're just going to put this rail up here and then cinch it down with the inside of that clamp, with the outside of it clamp. Grab it onto each other like that. But if you're like us and you have the utility track, there's a little bit of a different process. Instead now, we're going to flip this inside clamp by 90 degrees. We're going to put it through that utility track and put it here. I already have the other two in place, and you want them evenly spaced. And we're going to start with the center one. We're going to grab our rail, and we're going to push this into place up top. There it is. This is the way it should be grabbing on. You have a small lip right here, and that's what's going to grab onto your bed rail. Then we're going to push this against the back side, and we're looking about for a 3/8 inch of a gap between the very end of that rail and the bulkhead you have. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty close, and we can adjust that later on. From here, I'm going to grab the outside of one of those clamps, come to the center one, and I'm going to put this bolt to connect them together. You might have to push up in here because there's going to be a little channel in this rail here from the bottom. And this should grab right on. And then you'll just hand tighten it. This is what it should roughly look like. Get that a little bit tighter. From here, we can check if it's actually grabbing on well by just letting go of it slowly. There we have it. We're just going to repeat that same process for the front and the back one. And one thing I'll do after I have all these in place, I just go back and adjust. So what I mean by that is you're going to notice one thing, that this is a little bit kind of sloped downwards. We want this more level with our bed rails. So what I'll do is just kind of lift up a bit on here and push up on this clamp, make sure it's facing up. And then I'm just going to tighten it down. And something that does help this too is where this clamp is located. So I'll measure from the very end to where my clamp is sitting. It should be roughly 8 inches. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we're also going to check the side next to your cab and make sure that's about 8 inches as well. Same process, making sure this is level. Now that we got both rails on here, I fully tightened them down. I made sure they're the correct distance away from each other, meaning they're not too much overhang on the back side. Now to tighten them down, I used a 14mm socket and wrench. In the instructions, it does recommend a 1/2 inch, but that didn't work for me, so just double check. And you'll notice I put this foam pad here. I just made sure it fit around the contours of the end cap. And here's the other one. This is going to go on our driver's side. But before I put that one on, I'm just going to make sure our tailgate does close properly. And that's looking pretty good. So now we got our tonneau cover. What I'm going to do is come over to the end of it. You're going to notice we have these sliding tabs. I want that to come more inwards. The way I'm going to do that is by pressing on the silver lever here and pulling this in. It should stop. You'll have a lot of pressure behind it. And from here, we're just going to put it near to our bulkhead. Now, sometimes when you get this, it might be rolled inside out. So that's a good time to check. When you lay it like this, you should see this more matte surface. And the inside is going to have this more shiny surface. But if it looks like this, you're on the right track. I'm going to just bring that to the end as close as I can. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to roll it in like that. You're going to have this weather stripping. It should be facing out closest to your cab now. We're going to put this to the very end. The way this should sit, kind of like that. You can see that weather stripping is protecting the very end of that bulkhead. And I make sure it's like that on both sides. And you are going to have one of those tabs that we pushed in earlier on either side. Once we've got this mounted pretty good in the right spot, we're going to go underneath, and that tab that we pushed in, we're going to push it out to lock it into place. And what we can do from here is just unroll it for the first time now. The first time you do this, you're going to probably have a decent amount of wrinkles in it. because it's just kind of learning its shape. Unraveling it the rest of the way. Making sure all those bars sit into place and see if it properly latches on the back. Should have a decent amount of tension here. There we go. That's what I want to hear. From this point, what we're going to do is go to either side, pull on it, make sure we have a lot of tension here. What I recommend too is going outside, especially on a sunny day, and that's going to help remove a lot of the wrinkles on this so we can get that smooth surface on top. But other than that, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions, let us know here at eTrailer. And again, I'm Matt, and thanks for watching.